This is a brief tutorial of the game Harmonies as played on Board Game Arena. Harmonies is a placement game where you are trying to make various patterns to match animal cards that get you points, but you can use different strategies to overlap those patterns and be most efficient with your points, and also the different types of tokens that you place out will score on their own in various ways. Game is very straightforward. On your turn, you will choose one of these groups of 3 tokens, similar to like Azul, and you have to place all 3 of those tokens on your board. Here's my board over here, and there's some rules about placement we'll talk about in a minute, but every turn you have to take at least one of the groups, and then that group will be replaced randomly from the bag. You can see most of the different types are represented. The only one not represented here is this green. And then after you place all 3 of those tokens on your board, you can optionally take a card from the market up here or play a card that you already have in your array of this 4. You have the maximum of 4 that you can choose from. You're going to start out with one of these special spirit cards if you're playing with the spirit cards, and you can choose to add more to your spaces depending on what's available and depending on if you have that space available in front of you. Okay, so let's talk about placement of the tokens. So I'm going to switch over to a bit of a chart here that will explain it a little bit better. Okay, so these are the different types of tokens: the mountains, buildings, the trees, which are the brown trunks and the green leaves, water, and the fields. The water and the fields are always just placed by themselves. You can't stack anything on top of them. The mountains, the buildings, and the trees can have stacks. So the mountains can just stack up to 3 on their own. The trees can be up to 3 tall, but the green has to be on top to get to that 3. So you can you can place just a green by itself. You can place a brown trunk and then a green on top of it, or you can place 2 browns and a green on top of it, or you can just have the browns by themselves, though you want to try to make sure those eventually have green on them eventually, or something on them eventually. And then buildings can either be by themselves, flat on the level 1, or they can cover either mountains, other buildings, or the tree trunks. You can always place on an empty space. It doesn't have to be touching some other token, but you can't put anything underneath other tokens. And if there's an animal cube on it, which we'll look at in a bit later, you can't place on top of that space anymore. It is locked. All right, so what is the purpose of placing those tokens? Well, you're trying to make these various patterns that are shown on these cards that represent various animal habitats. And you can see there's 2 parts to the pattern. There is the pattern of tokens in a direction, in some sort of connected way, and this can be rotated in any direction. And then there's a little cube that is placed on top of one of the items in the pattern. So in this case, it's a blue next to a green, both on level 1. They have to be on level 1. And then the animal cube is placed on the water token. And if you do that, and if you create that and you place it on the water token, then you get to place a cube here in this, or sorry, whenever you take a card, it fills up with cubes. And as you place cubes onto the different patterns, you take them off. And as you take them off, you get the points that are shown here, well, the max number of points. So if I was able to just take 1 off of this card by the end of the game, then I'd only get 2 points. But if I took 4 out of this card, then I would get 10 points. And if I took all 5 of them off this card and I made this pattern 5 times, then this card would be completed. It would be removed from my 4 spots, freeing up another spot that I can put in another card in. And some that are more difficult patterns. So like this one, they have to have two high stacks. These two are trees with a trunk and then a treetop. And then this is a building that's too high, and you can see the color is either gray, red, or brown. So it doesn't matter what's on the first level, just that it's covered with that clay to make that building. And you do that once, and it's 5 points. You do it twice, it's 12 points, and this card is completed. And that's with all of these. They have all variations of it. Now, the key is you can overlap these patterns to some degree. So let's take this one, for example, the frog. If you place these two to get next to each other, a blue and a green next to each other, the blue one will get the cube on it. If I placed then a blue one here and had a blue and a green next to each other, I could place a blue cube again, or a cube again on that blue one. So you can overlap the things that don't have cubes on them, but you can't overlap the things that do. Right? So if I added a green to the other side of this, that would not complete the pattern again because that blue spot is taken already. So I would need to add a blue, which would then add another pattern of blue, green, and a place where I can place a new cube. So where that cube is within the pattern is very important. For instance, this one, you could place, if you had this pattern and then you're able to put a building on this side of it next to it, you could create that pattern again and place that cube on top of that. And these two will overlap with both patterns, but the buildings will not. You don't have to overlap, obviously, but to be most efficient and to most quickly get through points, it is, you're trying to create those combos and those overlappings because it takes less tokens to make those new animals. The spirit cards here act a little bit differently, but if you do play with them, they are optional. If you do play with them, you have a choice of 2 to begin with, and you pick one, and you're trying to make this pattern, and as soon as you make this pattern, you have 1 cube on it. It goes onto that pattern in the same way that it's shown here, and then this card is completed. It's removed from your 4, but now you have a special scoring condition at the end of the game. So for instance, if I make this pattern, I now have the dragonfly, and I get 7 points for each group of 2 water tokens or more. So at the end of the game, if I can make multiple groups of water that are at least 2, then I get 7 points for each of those. This one here is 6 points for groups of 2 buildings, or and there's variations on the different spirit cards. So I pick one of these, I complete it once, it's removed and completed, and it then counts at the end of the game, however many points are based on that scoring condition. All right, so besides getting points from these various animal cards, each individual terrain or token type gets points as well. And there's a nice little visual here if you want, if you hover over the question mark next to your name, and you can see how each of them score, similar to maybe Cascadia. You can see for the trees, any tree that doesn't have a green on top of it is not worth any points. But then if you do have a green on top of it, then each tree is worth 1, 3, or 7 points based on how tall it is. And note also that's that 19 and 21, that is the number of tokens that exist in this specific game with this number of players. The mountains are you get scores as well, 1, 3, and 7 based on the height. However, mountains have to be in ranges. They have to be touching each other. So if you have a lone mountain that's by itself and not touching any other mountains, then it doesn't get any points. But if you have multiple mountains together, then each of those mountains will get points based on their height. The fields, if you have a lone field by itself, it's not worth any points. But then if you have a group of fields of at least 2, it's worth 5 points. So in that case, you don't want to make just one huge field. You would want to make as many smaller groups of fields as you can. The cities, or the buildings, sorry, are based on the different other token types that building is touching. So if you've got a building that's at least 2 tall, and doesn't matter what's on the bottom, but if you have at least 2 tall, then you look at the surrounding tokens, and if there's 3 or more different types of tokens, including other buildings, that are touching that building, it's worth 5 points. Otherwise, it's not worth any points. And finally, the water, you look at the longest stream or river that's a connected row of water. And if you can, the way that it works, if you end up being able to take shortcuts, you have to take those shortcuts because they call it the shortest, longest path. And we'll see kind of how that looks when we get into the game a bit. But then based on how long it is, there's a scale of how many points you get for it. So that is the game. You're working through the different tokens. The game ends usually after all of the tokens have been pulled out of the bag. I believe it can also end if there are no more cards available. But you mostly get points based on these animal cards, and then based on the patterns of the tokens themselves, and then you can also get points from these spirit cards. All right, I'm gonna jump ahead. Well, let's look at a couple actions. So we can see that the first player here they chose their spirit card, and so in this case you get 5 points for groups of fields, extra points for that. They chose this animal card, and it fills it with the 3 cubes, so then they can start placing those cubes once they make those patterns, and then they're going to place their 3 tokens, and it turns out they were able to make that pattern right away with the 3 that they were able to pull directly from that. Happened to work out, and because of that, they are able to, well, they could have pulled that cube. I think they, in this case, forgot to do that. They'll be able to do it again later, but because you may not want to if you're trying to build up a different pattern. It always gives you the option. I think with the UI they'd forgotten to do that, but it it would pull this cube and place it on that mountain, and that mountain cube, their mountain spot, would be locked. But it would again give them that 4 points. All right, now it's my turn to choose which spirit card I want. Then I will take an animal card or chosen tokens. You can do it in either order, but I don't know that it matters too much. But there is no real order to it. I go ahead and start placing mine. I already placed a tree and a river. You can see I'm trying to get my spirit condition going as quickly as possible. And then I can either take an animal card, because I haven't taken one yet. This is just the spirit card. Or I can end my turn. I end up taking this because I see, hey, if I get this, then I'll have that tree, and I just have to place another green next to it, and I can overlap that tree that I've already created here to match this koala pattern as well. So you're always trying to look for those, how can I combine patterns to get that, but also looking at what's available and making sure that you can pull the things that you need. As these cards are taken, they are then refilled at the end of the turn. All right, I'm going to jump ahead so you can kind of see what a fuller board looks like. Okay, this is getting closer to the end of the game. We can see all 3 of our boards are starting to get filled. I'll show you a couple of things here on things that I've done. So I was able to complete one card, and then this is my spirit card that I was able to complete. This bear here, I was able to complete by overlapping. So I had these 2 mountains together, and then I was able to put one bush there, and that counted for one of them, and then one tree that's just one level there, and that counted for the other one. And so I got both of those, and they overlap. They both use the same mountains, and but they were able to both count towards this bear. Now, once you have done that and created those, I can now still stack on top of these because there's no animal cubes on it. It won't take the animal cube off just because I've made that pattern. But if I wanted to make these taller in order to get more points out of the mountain range instead of 3.7 points, I could certainly do that. But I can't change any of the ones that have cubes on them already. And you can see I'm working on this original one here. I've only gotten one pattern out of it, and same with this otter. It turned out that the green tokens really didn't come out very easily, and so both me and the green player over here had a real tough time filling in a lot of the patterns that they built based on just not being able to get a lot of the green, and I went before them, and so I kept taking green when they kept coming up. So that it was a bit of a tough situation for them, but so you have to kind of make sure that you're adapting to what's there. You know, a lot of the yellow stuff got taken, but none of these yellow animals are really taken. And once you have those 4 spots filled, then you no longer get to take any more cards. And so, we'll get to a point where everybody's filled their spots, and these aren't going to change that often until someone takes more or completes cards so that they have spots available again. So, just as a clarification, the end of the game either happens when all of the tokens have come out and you can't refill one of these spots with 3 tokens, or if someone has 2 or less spaces left in their board, and this will actually track here. So this is the number of empty. I have 7 left, green has 10, and blue has 6. And so when one of those gets down to 2, the game end is triggered. Everybody gets an equal amount of turns. So blue went first. That means that it'll end with green player. But that is how the game goes. And then at the end of the game, you track all of the, look at the highest number that you were able to clear off on these. So I'd get 11 points for this, 5 for this, 3 for this. Hopefully I can get more on those. And then you look at the individual patterns here as well. So this would give me 5 points for it's a field. This mountain range right now is 9 points. These trees will give me some points. This one won't though. The building I don't believe gives any points because it's not too high, so that one doesn't do anything for me. But then I've got this water that is 4 long, and so that right now would give me 8 points. But also I was able to get this going, so that's another 7 points for that water. And if I made another section of water, then maybe I'd get 7 more points for that. So it might be worth it, instead of trying to make this longer, to make another area of water if possible. There is a flip side of this board. We're playing on side A. There's a side B that's just a slightly different shape, and everything else is the same except the way that water is scored. Instead of looking for the longest river, you're actually splitting the map into different sections with the water, and the number of sections you're able to split it into is the number of is the number of points based on how many points that you get. Let's see, I mentioned here, so just as an example with the river, when we're looking at the longest path, right now this one is 5. If this player put a water cube right here, the longest would still be 5, because the shortest path that you can make is 5. You don't go out of your way to add length to the river. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And that's how you play Harmonies. You're continuing to take new tokens, try to fill those animal cards, try to get those overlapping combos, and then creating points based on the types of tokens that you put out until either the tokens run out or the room on the map for someone runs out, and that's the end of the game. All right, hope this was helpful.